So welcome everyone to our second Emerging Fellows webinar. And we're looking forward to today's discussion. I'm Matt Isaac. I am the chair of the Emerging Fellows Committee at ASHRI. And so I'll start by maybe just providing a little bit of background about what ASHRI is and our Emerging Fellows program before I introduce our speaker. So yes, here we go. So ASHRI stands for Academic Advisory Council for Signage Research and Education. And really, we're a nonprofit that's focused on thought leadership in the areas of signage and wayfinding. And the idea is to disseminate interdisciplinary research that can kind of connect academics who are studying these topics with practitioners and provide new insights in this space. We have had an emerging fellows program since 2017, which is meant to support early career scholarship in the area of on-premise signage. And to date, we have had over 20 fellows that have been named emerging fellows, and we have given away over $135,000 in awards to support research in many different areas. And you can see some of the topics and interests that some of our fellows have brought to the table. So we're grateful to have this program, and we think it's one of the key elements of what ASHRI does. This year, for our class of 2024, we had our largest our largest class of emerging fellows ever, which included 2 returning fellows who came back for a second year with us, and then 6 new first-year emerging fellows. And today we're going to be hearing from one of these emerging fellows, Lindsay May from the University of Maryland. So Lindsay is the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Strategic Initiatives, the Director of the Cavell Gallery, and an Associate Clinical Professor with the University of Maryland School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. And today she is going to be speaking on key topics in signage and wayfinding for exhibition spaces, literature review findings. And after she speaks, she's going to be joined for some Q&A with her mentor from ASHRI, who is Sanju Maharjan, who is an associate transportation researcher at Texas A&M. So with that, I will turn it over to Lindsay.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for coming to talk about the work I've been doing on signage and wayfinding for exhibition spaces. I'm working on a literature review, so I'm eager to share the ideas and the kind of key themes and get feedback, suggestions, so I can continue and develop the ideas. I'd like to start sharing what I've been working on with a quote by situating the literature review in this quote that I found in the materials. And I'll read it and just explain why I think it's so interesting. Among the accepted ideas on the subject of the museography of fine arts, there is one that constantly recurs. Visitors almost never read displayed texts. What is worse, their presence tends to distract visitors from the contemplation of masterpieces. So this is something I found through this literature review and through the work I've been doing. And it kind of situates signage and wayfinding at odds with the fundamental purpose of exhibition spaces and other spaces like galleries and museums, where the signage and wayfinding and in this quote, sort of specifically talking about displayed texts, is never read, and also has not just kind of a banal impact or a kind of ineffective impact, but it can actually distract visitors from contemplation and from the reason they're there. And so not that this is necessarily fundamentally true or always true, but I thought it just, in the literature review, I thought it was so interesting to kind of come upon this oppositional situation of what I was interested in and what we usually think of as the main function of exhibition spaces. And And so launching from there, I just want to explain a little bit how I came to this topic. As Matt said, I'm the director of the Keibel Gallery at the University of Maryland. And I have been for a few years now, where I curate and design exhibitions. And through this work, I find, and through the suggestion of Dean Dawn Jordan, who's here, that I think about this work through signage and wayfinding, things I was already doing in exhibitions, whether it's floor patterns or wall signage, hanging signage that helps people navigate or helps people contextualize the materials. Um, this is another exhibition that we had in the Keibel Gallery in 2023. So I was already kind of touching signage and wayfinding, working on it, designing through it in the curation and exhibition design that I was doing at University of Maryland. And I hadn't really thought of it in those terms. And so I'm really grateful for the Emerging Fellows Program and to ASHRI for helping me see the work I'm already doing in a new light, understand it more deeply, and get more engaged in the literature. So through the exhibition and design work I've been doing, I came to the research question, what are the key considerations and frameworks with regards to signage and wayfinding in exhibition design? So how is exhibition design defined or situated against signage and wayfinding? Um, and how can I approach exhibition design through these lenses more deliberately, more scholarly, more carefully? Um, I found that because exhibition design is so interdisciplinary, the first step was to define the terms that I wanted to use, or that I was using, or that I was reading in different places, but really meant different things to different people. Certain articles used some words, other places I found them applied differently or of different vocabulary use. So anyway, the first step was to kind of wrap my arms around this set of vocabulary and definitions, and establish them up front in the literature review. So some of the primary ones are circulation, so how someone moves through a space or through an exhibition, exhibition content, which is the material being presented, the objects, the artifacts, the media, exhibition design, which is looking at the space, the presentation of that content, the exhibition space, which is I'm defining as a space that supports content through exhibition design. An exhibition space can be a museum. It can be a sort of part of a museum. It can be part of a gallery, but we also find exhibition spaces, I think, very commonly now in civic institutions and public spaces, whether it's a library or an airport or even a sports arena. A lot of larger institutions are finding ways to present information about themselves, about the institution or the company, or about the history of that institution, or about or archival material about a place. So exhibition spaces happen in all sorts of different venues, not only the more traditional museum or gallery setting. And I'm trying to be inclusive in this literature review, and in this analysis of thinking about all the different ways and places that exhibitions happen today. There are temporary and permanent exhibitions, so the timeline is of relative importance to thinking about exhibition design, signage, and wayfinding, of course, and then visitors and audience as people that are coming to be presented with new ideas through content and supported by exhibition design. So all of these terms are interconnected and a little bit sticky to each other. And they'll come up again and again, and this list is also growing. So if you have any suggestions for this through the presentation, I would love to hear them. Okay, so let me move this. Okay, I'm seeing the titles are kind of there, popping in and out. So the methodology for this literature review was to define the inclusion criteria, which was that the literature talked about the topics often, based on that definitions list, actually. I identified literature and assessed it for quality and eligibility by making sure the sources were scholarly journals and other sources. I also was lucky to have Sunji recommend a few articles from the Interdisciplinary Journal of Signage and Wayfinding. So it was nice to have some in-house isn't the right word, but some ASHRAE references and resources really focusing on the signage and wayfinding aspect of things. And I was able to do this a few times to develop my reference list. And through the literature review, I identified three key themes that are coming up again and again in the materials. The first is the importance of signage and wayfinding for accessibility and understanding. The second is the relationship between exhibition design, signage and wayfinding, and architecture in the exhibition comprehension and engagement. And the third is the challenge of balancing information and aesthetics in exhibition design as it pertains to, again, signage and wayfinding. So I'm going to also just show through the presentation a few images as we go to help illustrate some of the things I'm talking about and not just have a whole slideshow of text. So the first theme is the importance of signage and wayfinding for accessibility and understanding. One thing that is important to think about in exhibition spaces is that the vast majority of the audience, the visitor population to an exhibition, is a first-time visitor, whether that's a first time to that exhibition space itself, whether it's a first time to that exhibition sort of presentation. So maybe someone has been to a certain gallery or been to a certain part of a museum before, but they're a first-time visitor to that exhibition, that arrangement of material, the arrangement of space that is happening at that time. And then the third way that the audiences are novel or first-timers is that they are often first-timers to the content. So first-time learners about a certain subject, or first-time learners about the subject through the specific presentation. So even if someone is coming to see an exhibition because they are familiar or interested in a topic, they often are seeing it presented in that specific way for the first time. So all that is to say that people coming to galleries and coming to museum spaces to see exhibitions are navigating their body and navigating their mind for the first time in that setting in real time. A second facet of the audience is to think about the diversity of the visitors that come to an exhibition. So there's a spectrum of knowledge about the content and the space itself. So a spectrum of previous knowledge that they're bringing to this experience. There's a spectrum of age of visitors, from young children, early learners, to seniors who bring expertise and experience in a different way, and a range of mobility and accessibility. So how does an exhibition allow for and accommodate and include all these different types of visitors into a single learning experience? So signage and wayfinding also supports narrative structure and circulation structure. So again, that word circulation that we talked about before, and this is how exhibitions leverage signage and wayfinding to support the structure of the conceptual narrative being presented. So again, on this one hand, we have exhibition content. So how is the narrative of the exhibition content presented? And then how is the circulation, so the movement through the real space, presented? Signage and wayfinding are essential to supporting narrative navigation and physical circulation narrative, and how do those two things come together? And the last point I'll make in this section is that the idea of mental load reduction as a key role for signage and wayfinding. So someone, sort of to kind of summarize, someone that's new to this space and new to these ideas, someone that has their own unique set of previous knowledge and abilities and mobility, someone that is navigating ideas and navigating space for the first time. Signage and wayfinding supports this visitor, makes it easier for them to narratively um, narratively navigate and then physically navigate to reduce the mental load, the amount of other thinking going on, so that the visitors can increase their engagement with the content. So if someone is supported by signage and wayfinding through an exhibition, they're more able to engage with the content, to absorb and think and reflect, and make connections, rather than the double mental or triple mental load of being in a new space, navigating a physical environment, navigating a conceptual environment that's been structured, by the exhibition curators, and letting sort of all that happen at the same time is a lot to ask. So signage and wayfinding can really reduce the mental load of a visitor to an exhibition space. These are just two examples of different navigation structures or circulation structures in an exhibition, both by the firm Diller Scofidio Renfro. One would be a nonlinear set of artifacts presented in a field condition. So a visitor might move through this in any number of ways on the left and on the right, also by Diller Scofidio Renfro. Artifacts presented in a timeline, so a linear presentation of information. And we could have another conversation about the pros and cons of different signage and wayfinding for these two structures, but it's a way just to illustrate that there are different ways, whether it's nonlinear or a field condition, where there's no single navigation path, or something more linear like a timeline where you're seeing change from object to object, and that's an important part of the experience. So just illustrating some of the ideas. Okay, the second theme is the relationship between exhibition design, signage and wayfinding, and architecture. And this is, again, within the lens of, or through the lens of comprehension and engagement. So some factors and some key topics that came up in this are thinking about the complexity of exhibition environments, layers of information, different types of objects, or media or artifacts or graphics. The nature of the exhibition design is very important to think about, how it operates either despite or with or against the architecture. So this relates to the third bullet too, which is that often an architectural project has its own narrative, its own set of design ideas, and priorities, and an exhibition is kind of nested within a predetermined narrative environment. So sometimes narrative, or rather exhibition design and exhibition narratives can operate independent of an architectural narrative or a architectural concept. They can work with it, they can respond to it. So thinking about the relationship of actually the exhibition design within the context it's in, I thought was very interesting, and something that I don't think has been presented through many exhibition designs that I'm aware of. So anyway, maybe a future line of inquiry, but the relationship between exhibition design, which is often thought of as a kind of hermetically sealed experience with or despite the architectural narrative it sits within. Art signage and wayfinding is a mediator of new perspectives, so it helps people transport from the information that they started with when they came to the exhibition, and transport to a new perspective or a new understanding. In this sense, signage and wayfinding and exhibition design is a communication design discipline, thinking about the communication of message, of narrative, and of specific singular facts or details about what someone might be looking at. The role of text played a very big role in this section, thinking about all the facets of typography, communication design, form, color, placement, scale, and how these support or at times hinder engagement with the content. Um, so I think those themes beg the broader question, why are we talking about architecture when we talk about exhibition design and signage and wayfinding? Through the literature review, I'm finding that exhibition design and architecture are inextricably linked, because of that nested nature of an exhibition within some space, within an architecture that has ideas about space already. So the nature of a building or a space needing to be present before an exhibition can occupy it, that order of operations, I think, means that there needs to be some negotiation and some navigation between an architectural space and the exhibition that is sort of placed within it. Um, Also, the recognition that the visitor experience to an exhibition does not begin at the first threshold to that learning space. An exhibition is often part of a larger institution or a larger experience. Someone will have already navigated some part of a building or another place to get to an exhibition. So what's that experience from the front door of the building to the exhibition? And I'll kind of just reference quickly. um, I think another line of inquiry would be what is a visitor's experience of an exhibition before they even get to the institution or get to the building, with the proliferation of um, sort of digital media and social media and advertising. What do people know about an exhibition space before they get there? And so it's kind of a longer, more complex story about exhibition design rather than, again, just that hermetic experience. How does someone arrive to that first threshold, and what's supporting that? Um, and then yeah, so again, the literature, I think, led me to conclude, or led me to find in different places the links between architecture and exhibition design, and how signage and wayfinding are one of the many threads that connect those two scales. This is an example of another Diller Scofidio Renfro exhibition that is engaging the architecture as part of the exhibition. And this is from 2003, and part of the exhibition included a wall-mounted drill that would literally engage the architecture by puncturing it and you might argue destroying part of the gallery wall as the exhibition is undergoing or is underway. So this idea of transformation of the architecture of the permanent space through a temporary show, just something to think about and illustrate kind of the points in different ways. And the last key theme was the challenge of balancing information and aesthetics. So the literature identified the primary objective of exhibition design to convey knowledge and enhance understanding. I don't have a ton of time, but I found myself reacting to that as a potential bias in the literature, that exhibition design is only about the support of um, the um, the content itself, only the presentation of objects, rather than its own design discipline or its own experience, which leads me to kind of the third bullet point here. Um, and I'll just touch on the second quickly. So the literature also talked about the battle for visible areas, the density of information that's presented in exhibition, and how to balance competing styles of signage to different scales, whether it's the titles and the supporting text or object labels, and the balance between all the information that should be communicated to support the exhibition narrative, and how that relates to also just the saturation and the aesthetic experience. And the third and final challenge in balancing information and aesthetics is the design approach between an exhibition design that feels background to the content or feels minimal, really centers the objects as the foregrounded experience, versus what I was reading about as a more relational or co-present exhibition design. So this is where the signage and wayfinding might be as or rather co-present. So creating its own relationship with the visitor, not only about the objects, but also about the exhibition design itself, whether that's environmental design, information design, other sensory information. And thinking about this relational or very visible exhibition design as a hybrid strategy of display and design that creates drama, moving from object-centered displays, so something on a pedestal perhaps or something on a wall, to more multisensory, relational, dynamic experience where the exhibition design itself is part of the content to be consumed and experienced. These are two examples. I think of a more minimal or object-centric on the left, art presented at the Whitney. We can see the kind of only signage we see here is the painting titles, the art titles, versus something like on the right, which is a more multisensory environment that's uses color and text and scale and media and different lighting environments to create an environment that feels saturated with signage, wayfinding, and the exhibition design itself as a part of the kind of content to be consumed. So the next steps for this work is to keep developing my conclusion, which I think will have a lot to do with what I was just talking about, that last topic of the object-centric or minimal signage and wayfinding strategy and exhibition design versus a relational or experiential exhibition design. I want to look for any literature that brings in the ideas of universal design, which is an architectural concept about designing for diversity in mobility, in accessibility, and how when we start to make things more accessible for one group, there are unintended positive consequences for others. So I think there's a lot of ties between thinking about the diverse audiences in exhibition design and thinking about the way that architecture has a discourse around accessibility and inclusivity through universal design, and see if there's any literature in there. I think some openings or some gaps that I will hope to explore in the future after the literature review would be the impact of digital technology on exhibition design, inclusive of also social media and other ways people engage with exhibition content before even arriving to a space, the concepts of sustainability, waste, and exhibition design, and digital exhibitions, hybrid digital and physical exhibitions. So the ways that information is presented now these days. And so to conclude, the big three themes, again, were the role of signage and wayfinding in exhibition design as it relates to the nature of exhibition visitors and their experience, the links between signage, wayfinding, exhibition design, and architecture. And lastly, what I in my mind have started to call the designer's dilemma, so communication design and the theory of object-centric or minimal exhibition design, and relational exhibition design and signage and wayfinding, where really the signage and the wayfinding becomes present and part of the experience to be consumed, not only standing behind objects. So with that, there's supposed to be a question slide. Questions? Does anyone have thoughts, questions? Oh, it's the last slide. Thank you for listening to this topic. Thank you, Dr. Maharzan, for your help, for finding the articles after we talked last, and for all your support. Yeah, I'd love to open it up to questions.
Yes, Lindsay, it was a really great presentation, and you have like explored the exhibition design, what are the gaps, existing gaps, and what is the future works that needs to be done, like such as sustainability and digital technology, how to implement them in the exhibition design. So yeah, it is a really, really informative and like very, very knowledgeable presentation. So we would like to go forward for any questions that you have for Lindsay. So yeah, we are open for it.
I will kick us off, Lindsay. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate that. It was really interesting. And so I will caveat that I'm coming at this from a very different consumer psychology marketing perspective. So
Good.
this question could be completely irrelevant. But it seems to me that since, as you mentioned, there are different preferences among gallery visitors in terms of how they want to interact and engage with signage and that it seems like an opportunity for customization where,
Mm.
I could imagine a world where you get a tablet or something like that that has very different kinds of information based on what level of depth or what your existing knowledge is, and it has different information. I'm curious if that has been done or explored in any spaces and how that has been received.
Yeah. That takes me also to the kind of prompting quote about how no one reads signage anyway. Kind of ostensibly, according to that source at least. And so I wonder if there is a role for um, pulling sort of some of that out of the visual field and presenting it in a multimedia sense. I think the example that I can think of to that effect is when you go to a museum and you get the headsets and you can kind of click through and press numbers at different stops. So if you're more interested in some objects, you can hear a multimedia or hear a presentation or hear someone talking about what you're seeing. And it is a little choose your own path in that way because you're doing it at your own pace. You're electing when and what to listen to. But the choose your own adventure, I would also, yeah, I'll think about that in terms of the exhibition design and the spatial design too. So how do you kind of customize your experience within the context and do so intentionally, not kind of just, by happenstance.
Sort of
Thank you.
sort of piggybacking off of that, and again, this is not my expertise, and great presentation, super interesting. But there are some things on the marketing side, and I can send them to you as well. But they have some interactive billboards where, based on your, I look at DEI, based on your skin color, you can get some different personalizations. So it sort of reads who you are and then provides it. So just sort of an interesting thing as we kind of look at like where do we personalize, what makes sense, where does that have ethical implications. So
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, please send me anything that comes to mind in these topics in general. Deli, can I ask if in that interaction or in the examples you're thinking of, is it the billboard or the media is reading the visitor and then presenting something, or do you have to input your own information? Okay, so it's not even.
yeah, it's based on and again, definitely ethical implications because it looks at gender and skin color are sort of the main things, which, obviously we know those things are evolving and it's a spectrum. But yeah, so it's sort of that uncanny valley effect of like how creeped out we get and if we like those things. So
Yeah. And are you voluntarily sharing or is it
yeah, no,
pulling?
it's just literally, it's almost kind of like a mirror in a way. And again, I know I'm not describing this well, but it just sort of like provides it based on what it sees. So very
Fascinating. Thank
yeah.
you.
Hi, Lindsay. This is Chris Offrey, University of Cincinnati. I enjoyed your presentation, and my background is in, well, is highway signage, street signage, of a variety of different types, and very much interested in how signage contributes or detracts from a sense of place and that type of thing, as well as how it communicates. And I'm interested in what might be your outcomes. What would a good, an effective system, how could you measure those outcomes? Or is there an objective metric, or is it qualitative, or how do you think about those things?
Yes, that's such a good question. I have been finding that the scholarship is very qualitative and subjective as something that's adjacent to design disciplines. There's a lot of subjectivity. Um, Although I have been, since I am the director of a gallery, I have been sort of imagining these scenarios where I set up kind of two side-by-side exhibitions or some way to try and measure. So I haven't found any um, quant quantitative, someone spent 5 more seconds when the text was this size. Um, or people, took a quiz after they went to an exhibition or took a survey and did better or worse if XYZ was the case. I haven't found that type of research. I will keep looking for that. I think that's a really good question. I yeah, I've had a hard time imagining, yeah, kind of successful studies in that way. But it's a great question. I found, yeah, the research to be more qualitative and, yeah, about people's experiences and feelings about their experience and about their learning, rather than anything that sort of quantifies through a survey or an exit survey or, um, again, timed sort of metrics.
Okay, thank you.
Um, this is Steve. I'm at the University of Arkansas. Um, and just thinking through this, and because signage and wayfinding stuff is really, we are all learning, I think, that it's really interdisciplinary.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that you're touching on, and I'm kind of like Matt, I'm coming from a different perspective on this. However, I work at the Walton College of Business, the founder of Walmart. And so a lot of the things that you're suggesting as far as especially wayfinding kinds of things, these are all important retailing kinds of issues. And so I don't know, and my direct research experience with this is pretty limited, but I also think that there might be some, as you were suggesting, there might be some more quantitative, some more objective kinds of measures. And, what I've seen are, just as you suggested before, some kind of satisfaction measure upon exit, or observation kinds of studies using heat maps and that kind of stuff. And so I don't know if you encountered any of that, but it sounds like a really sort of similar sort of meta context, because it's people going through things that they want to see or experience somehow. And I'm just kind of pitching that out there. I don't have a direct question, but it seems like it might work.
Yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is that the interdisciplinary scope could be maybe pulled out by a radius or two.
Yeah.
I'm more in design disciplines, use geography and communication design and architecture, and but maybe taking that out and just looking at signage and wayfinding in other experiences where people are navigating with a different, they're coming in with a different, outcome,
Yeah.
like shopping or purchasing versus learning. And so, but it's still kind of information intake, which is, I guess, the kind of bedrock of signage and wayfinding anyway, is information intake.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great.
And I don't want to offer that's a dangerous direction to go, because, and I think I see at least two co-authors here that we tried to stretch the, I don't know, signage understanding into a lot of different areas. And so, kind of, I don't want to prompt you to overdo it, but it seems like there might be some approaches. I'll try to look for some things. I don't have anything directly in mind, but it's an example because I do teach marketing research class, and I show the students examples of shopper satisfaction surveys and that kind of stuff. And I just seems like there might be, some connections there.
Yeah, anything you have, I'd love to see. I guess I in hearing or in sort of thinking through this, I wonder about the visitor or the kind of customer, the difference in expectation and intent. So someone coming to an environment where they think they're going to learn, or where they may or may not have the intent to purchase, if that's too big of a difference in to bridge the research gap, to say, well, this works in a retail environment, it would work in a learning environment, because that's what I think an exhibition space really is. It's a learning environment.
Sure.
So I wonder, and so it'd be, of course, I would love to get any references, and I wonder, yeah, just about the bridges that could be built, but also things that may not line up as much. But
yeah,
lots to think about. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Great. Good job.
Right. I think we are probably at time here. So I guess if others have questions, you can see Lindsay's contact information on the screen. So please feel free to follow up directly with her, or if you have any suggestions or ideas for her as she goes through this. Just want to say thanks again to Lindsay for the great presentation, super informative, and Sanju for serving as her mentor through this process. Also, just want to mention that we are continuing our webinar series with our third webinar, which will be April 16th. Daniel Villanova will be presenting on in-store pricing, signage, and rate finding. So hope to see all of you there. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Great job.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.